Kayla. Good start on this. I really like the color, and I like this idea of having this kind of motion, background. So just a few suggestions and observations. So first of all, from last week, I would suggest incorporating the feedback about removing this fan piece or the processor. I think it's a processor, just because it's causing a little bit of complication, and the circular element here is kind of neutralizing this one here. So I just think if you remove this little bit, you can just try it. I think it would be a lot stronger, and just the piece would come off a little bit better. So in terms of the background, though I like it, I think it's swallowing up your caricature quite a bit. It's really strong. So I don't know. I don't know what you have here. And be sure when you do your shadow that you try doing that cast shadow tutorial. There's also one in the classroom too. It's at the top of the threads. Well, actually last week's threads, but also in the announcements. And it's, a few steps, but it's not the drop shadow, it's a cast shadow, so it really creates a little bit more sense of realism. So in terms of the background, I would just suggest using something simpler that doesn't dominate the caricature. You could try maybe making it, whoops, shoot. Oh, I see, that's it right there. You could try maybe adding some type of an adjustment, even like a brightness contrast, or something like a levels, seeing if you made it darker. See, even now darker, yeah, it's just so active. It's going to be really hard to get that to, to really come down. You could do something, you could try adding, another layer on top of it, and filling it. I'm just going to discard this actually. Oh, whoops. And, filling it with a color. I'm just going to use white because I think it needs to be lighter. And then you can try using blend modes if you wanted to. Then you could, just see, see what they look like. You can kind of, play around with them. Some of them don't do anything, as you can see, because what it does is it blends the two layers together. Yeah, see, most of them don't. Let's see, exclusion. But even something lighter, and I think I'm going to turn your shadow off too. And I think once you do the cast shadow and not this drop shadow, but the drop shadow just makes it look kind of like it's floating. I think it's going to really, just be a lot stronger. Let me see here. Well, I'm just going to go back into the history and turn off everything I just did. So we're back here. So another suggestion is the text is also pretty hard to read because of that effect. Again, the effects are great, but legibility is really first and foremost. So I think I suggested this last week, but I would suggest putting the words, each word on a different layer. Then you can really play around with it. And again, I know I've showed you all these so many times probably, but if you have the text on different layers, then you can really work with playing around with the placement. You can change the size. You can even use two different fonts. You could use different font styles. There's just a lot of different things you can do when you separate that text. Another thing I would suggest is going to DaFont and looking at some other kinds of fonts. There's all these techno fonts. For example, Sci-Fi, there's 43 pages of all these fonts. So you might, if you look around a little bit, you might you might be able to find one that looks kind of techy that would go with the computer square, but really focus on legibility, because a lot of these just aren't, let me see what the LCD ones are, just aren't legible. And again, it's one thing if it looks really cool, but the first thing it has to do is communicate and give the client what they want. So this is pretty hard to read, so You know, you could add layer styles if you wanted to go with a dark type. I think you've already done that. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to look at, you know, an outer glow, just because sometimes, you know, those can really work as well. I'm going to add red just because it's not really doing much, though, is it right now? Oh, yeah, it's, and again, this looks pretty bad, but so does that. But this is one way to get the text to stand out. This really needs to be like a really light color, like a light, you know, like a really light orange, or even a white would probably, or something like that even. So anyway, just some tips on how to make, because this, you know, there's a couple more drafts, and again, you can play with all this stuff. I do think you could probably find a font that's more, that would support your concept a little bit more. But see how close the letters are too, and they're all in caps. That also makes it really hard to read. You know, another thing too that you could, I mean, I know we went over all this stuff in that last assignment. If you go into the characters too, you know, you can, you know, once you have to select it, but you can space them out too. See, you know, there's all these leading and kerning adjustments. So again, you can space them out by, you know, even saying 200, and you can see how it spaces them out. And then what that does is it just makes it easier to read. But all caps is in general really hard to read. So anyway, so just some suggestions. So you might want to really look for other backgrounds, just, you know, and this is why I kind of post all these examples, because, you know, they really show all the negative space that, you know, that's really necessary to allow the caricature to stand out. And again, this background, when he first did it, was really too strong, so he had to really darken it. And again, the shadow is cast, it's not a drop shadow. So anyway, so I hope you find this useful, and yeah, feel free to post drafts before, you know, before the final, and definitely try to just work a little bit more before you put this in the final Dropbox. Okay,